I'm Eric Vallone again. This is the LEA Group podcast. I'm here with my partner Aaron Eden and our guest Claire Grissom today, and we're talking about best practices for building out CTE pathways. And so, just to quit a quick background for those of you that aren't familiar with us, we're co-founders of LEA Group, a consultancy with a couple decades of experience now, many decades, maybe more for Aaron than I, in education from DK through higher ed, public and independent, domestic, international. And we've been both frontline educators as well as leaders and administrators of educational institutions. And we also have a lot of experience working outside of education in startups, multinationals, and nonprofits. And we spent the last decade focused on workforce development and CTE, especially in historically underserved areas. And we help educational leaders catalyze and realize the goals and dreams they already have for their students and communities, things that they're already working on, trying to help them break through those log jams of constraints that pile up in these contexts. Now, today, that's enough about us. Today, we're joined by Claire Grissom, Director of College and Career Readiness, or Career and College Readiness at San Benito High School District. And Claire, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on and share with you what I know.
Awesome. Great. So we thought it would just be helpful to ground anyone who does end up listening to a little bit about your background and your context. So maybe that kind of couple of minutes around, who you are, how you landed here, your role at the district,
Mhm.
and, maybe finishing with what really excites and inspires you most about CTE, what gets you up every morning.
Yeah, so I've been, in education for 20 years now. It kind of hurts a little bit to say that, but 20 years, and I've been here at Hollister High School in San Benito County for the last 12 years. So in terms of that, I started off as a teacher here, become assistant principal. I think it's important for me, as a professional, that I was assistant principal before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID. And that
Mm,
really made a difference in how I reflect on education and how we serve students.
mm,
I was able to move into a position. It started off as coordinator of college and career readiness, and it's since evolved into a director position. So really what we're looking at is our North Star is our mission statement, right? The greatest range of options for our students upon graduation. I wanted our school to be able to live and breathe that. And so that's kind of our North Star is the greatest range of options for every student upon graduation. We get students that start off in different places in ninth grade, and we have students who end in different places in 12th grade. But the point is that we want them to get to wherever they want to go. So that's really important to me. And in doing that, I built intersegmental partnerships. Right, we're always using that improvement approach. It's good. It could be a little bit better, and so we're always looking at it from that improvement lens. And then my last particular piece in grounding in the conversation is, that systems organization. So, what shiny new thing is out there is really neat, but does it fold into the system, and is the system producing what it's designed to produce?
mm,
That's the biggest thing for me. The product at the end, is that what we want? If it's not, then we have to take a look at what the system is.
mm. Great. Thank you. I
Excellent.
definitely. Oh, go ahead, Aaron.
Well, I was going to jump into the topic. Did you have a follow-up to that,
I
Eric?
did have
Or
one. I know messing with our script here a little bit, but I had one follow-up, which is, Claire, you spoke about the COVID piece, and I wonder if there was kind of one key point from that experience that stands out from being there pre, during, and post that kind of really does inform your, how you approach things.
Yeah, so I think the biggest piece for me, right, in terms of the volume, I think it's important to note, like majority of high schools around 1,200 to 1,500 students. We serve 3,500 students on a single high school campus. So we see everything. Some things that you may only see once in your career, we see weekly.
Mm,
And so for me, coming out of COVID, what I saw was, yeah, we saw the behavior, both an internal behavior, more 5150s, but external behavior, more fights, more pieces. And connecting it back to education, the light went out, right? Like the light went out in terms of the students weren't excited about coming back to school. There were so many things else going on, and it was every kind of student, every genre of student, the light was gone. And so for me,
mm,
the drive was, how do we relight that fire, that excitement to learn?
mm.
And that's kind of where I headed.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, Aaron,
Mhm.
please.
yeah, I love that
Wow.
that way of kind of framing what happened during that time.
Mhm.
Yeah, so heading in specifically to this topic and kind of building CTE pathways, for those that may not be quite as familiar, CTE being career technical education, right? What, just kind of curious how you view CTE, relative to how kind of, it can sometimes be thought of as the sort of old vocational ed, and just how do you see CTE as a part of a K-12 these days, maybe relative to that old view?
Yeah, I think, voc ed, it's so interesting because when I started out and talking about our CTE pathways, a lot of our adults, right, my age and older were like, what is CTE? And I'm like, voc ed. And they're like, oh, I get it. Or ROP, right? Like those are familiar things. And there are many, right? And we're many voc ed and ROP programs that were very strong. But I think in terms of, realigning and integrating some things, right? In 2013, that model curriculum standards came in, and it really asked us to think about integrating industry partnerships and the CTE advisories and those particular pieces, right? Really, ultimately, we want to connect education to industry. And in voc ed, that wasn't it. It was your classroom and you were learning really cool stuff, but it wasn't necessarily connecting directly to an industry
Mhm.
piece. And so when you talk about, career technical education, you have the technical piece, right? That technical ed. And so that's like learning to measure twice and cut once. But then you have the professional piece. So shaking hands, looking them in the eye, interview skills, and you're doing that in front of an industry partner. So it's a dynamic intersegmental approach that's really different. And to boot, right, we're always asking in education, well, we need more money, we need more money. And in the last several years, there has been a lot of money out there, right? You have your Golden State Pathways, you have your CTIG. Perkins has always been a standby, but those are pieces, right? K-12, K-16 in California. There's been a lot of money thrown at this idea of this intersegmental approach, but really you have to look beyond the classroom. And that's the hardest part, right? There's not a silver bullet. There's not a magic wand that you can wave. But if you really want to change it up, it's the system by which, like, if you can create that silver system, right, then you've got it. But that takes a lot of work, and that takes a lot of, industry knowledge, and like that strong culture piece.
Yeah, thanks for that. And then maybe, you know, briefly just, the idea, I think sometimes what people thought about voc ed in the past was that it was a little bit of a tracking kind of process where, kids that were bound for college went one direction and kids that maybe weren't kind of, did a little more voc ed pathways. How would you say that is that different now? And if so, how?
Yeah, so I think it's still alive and well. We have to admit that it's still alive and well, even within my system, right? So, I have asked, right, my counseling team, who's 8 deep, right? Like it is a 2 year, the CTE pathways are a 2 year commitment. It's not an in or out. It's not a single elective. It's not an in and
Mhm.
done. And the reason is, right, you have to gain that knowledge, and it takes longer than 1 year to get that knowledge. But within that, right, what we've developed is this mini pathway, right? This 2 year pathway. And we can talk about academies at another time. Is within that, you're getting the industry certifications that sometimes take more than 1 year. They're building a portfolio that takes more than 1 year. You're doing those things. And the last piece I'll talk about is many of our CTE pathways have college credit embedded into that, right? So your
Mhm.
engineering class is also a 2+2 Cal GETSI to a CSU. My welding is that, and they can go on and get their welding certification. And I think the magic of that particular piece, when we talk about tracking versus it's and, right? And when I'm looking at my, EDD program and doing my doctoral work, the power of and is important because it's or, right? Many years, even now,
Mhm.
college or career. Well, that's just not true. Everybody has to get a job someday. And if you don't have the skill set to get a job, then we're all in trouble. And so the power of and is that they can be college and career ready. And I want to speak to that. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper in that is many of our students, right, particularly our historically underserved students, if they're going to go into post-secondary education, you betcha they're also working. So why is it that we're not also giving them a living wage job, a living wage, not minimum wage, not doing the, bare minimum or underpaid, right? We're giving them a living wage job out of high school so they can also go on to post-secondary of their choice, right? It's the power of and that's the most important change for me from voc ed to CTE.
Mhm. Perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then, so speaking of, pathways, CTE pathways, which are sometimes now also, closely aligned with dual enrollment pathways, and, kind of packaged in even more,
Early college. Yeah.
yeah, impactful yet, a little more complicated, or involved setups. What would you say, is in building a new pathway, what's
Mhm.
the hardest thing about building a new pathway and sort of sustaining it?
So I think the biggest thing is the significant upfront investment. So not only in the money, I'll give you two examples. So we just lifted off the ground. We're 18 months in to Academy of Health Science. So that one was fairly easy. And I say that because everything's hard, but that was fairly easy because we had a very strong teacher in a sports medicine pathway, patient care pathway, right? She was a very strong teacher. She was ready to turn it into academy. She had all of our CTE advisories and all of that. So in terms of the personnel investment, that was not a significant cost. But I'm going to turn around and do our Academy of Education, right? We're lifting that or launching that in next fall, in the fall of 26. And that we're in an educational system. That is going to be my heaviest lift. I have to find a teacher. I have to get them certified. I have to get the industry partners. And it's not that nobody is willing. The hardest lift for me is the coordination of the efforts to produce a product or to produce a system, right? To create that system or that academy. That's huge.
Yeah, for sure. And then, what in terms of the industry connected piece, how, that can notoriously be hard to make, really impactful, and
Mhm.
also to sustain. And curious if you have any thoughts on that particular aspect of a CTE pathway.
Yeah, I think the industry is hard because I think of it like speaking two different languages, right? We speak in education, we speak the language of education, and um, we love to watch our students bloom and grow and then send them off, right? Like it's like this beautiful, beautiful idea of this student leaving us and they're packed full of the knowledge they need. And the other end, right, and my husband is in private industry, is not in education. So we have these conversations all the time. There's a huge disconnect between what education is doing with our students and what industry needs of our students. And so the industry needs them, the very basics: show up on time, do the job I asked you to do, tell me when there's something wrong, and do what just do the job, like do it.
Mhm.
And that's that's hard to get. And so going back to what we do in education, we have a work-based learning continuum. And I think everybody really aims for this gold star of an internship, right? That's great. Like, yes, we should all be going there, and we're going there too. But it's all the little stuff along the way. It's building the relationship. So have them come in as guest speakers, see your program, meet your students, listen. The next piece that my Academy of Health Science does really well is the students do projects and they present the projects to the industry. So industry partners are coming in, they're listening to the students, they're learning about their knowledge, they're asking them questions. That gets our industry partners excited. This kid is really cool. Like, this kid really wants to do this. Great. Can you provide that for them? Right. And
Mhm.
so, like, building the little steps to get to the internship is the biggest piece, right? And so the continuum is more important than the internship. The relationship, and if you were to hire anybody, I would say hire a work-based learning specialist. Hire somebody whose job it is to make the connections and keep and maintain the connections that you have with the industry. That would be, building that system.
Yeah, definitely hear that. If you hire anybody, hire a work-based learning specialist. We've
Yes,
seen schools and worked with schools that have them and worked with schools that don't. And the difference is pretty stark
yes,
in what the opportunities that are available for the students and the support for the teachers. It's huge.
yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to jump in here because I feel like we covered two legs of the tripod, right? We talked about the kind of difficulties from the district administrative perspective, a little bit linked in with the educator there in terms of getting them up to speed. We talked about the kind of industry provider, what they need, how that's not often met. And I'm curious about that third leg, which is, of course, the students at the center of this. And I'm curious, are there any common obstacles, any lessons learned around difficulties in starting up a new pathway with respect to student engagement, recruitment, making sure you're validating demand and or building that demand if, let's say, the labor market data and the strategic plan says we should go in this direction, but the students are maybe not excited about that yet. I'm just curious, have you had any of those situations or navigated that in any particular ways?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And it's kind of like you really have to, gather all your things and then you have to walk away from it and think about it for a while and come back. And so I'll
Mm,
give you like a kind of a funny example, right? So a huge need, right, in particular in California is water management, right? That's a huge, like, holy, like, we talk about it all the time, like
mhm.
water management for everybody. Guess what is not exciting for students? Water management. That is not exciting, right? So
Yeah.
I could not ever build a pathway to water management. I couldn't because the demand from our students is not there. And so then you turn around and take a look. So for example, I'm going to use our Academy of Health Science. It was, we had a strong teacher. The students were excited about it. We had more and more students like being a part of it. We had a huge need in the healthcare industry, right? That's LMI data points. So we had this trifecta, right? Strong start or strong core, strong student base, and a strong need in the industry. And so we strung those pieces together to make, what's becoming a juggernaut. I mean, it's quite
Yeah.
interesting to watch the evolution of that particular academy. I am very interested to see, right, this Academy of Education. So we have, right, this Academy of Education has this beautiful dual enrollment that will lead to associates in science degree with transfer to our two local CSUs, right? This beautiful piece. Teachers are excited about it, right? Our local elementary schools are excited. Our, First Five is excited. Are the students going to be excited? Because the word on the street is educators don't make money and there's no money in education. And
Mhm.
so that again will be an unknown, and it is an unknown, right? My counselors are always asking me when we started this conversation, my counselors are like, well, who are you going to get to do this? Like, who are
Mm,
you, like, who is actually interested in this Academy of Health Science? And I said, well, my aim is just 60 students per grade level. And we're only starting with grades 9 and 10, only
mm,
Mhm.
60. And certainly we have now, right, in our second year, we just had 33 that were willing to commit in our 11th grade class now. So that was
yeah.
that'll be our first graduating class. It was 33. But I bet you this year we have 57 in our current ninth grade. And I bet you this year will be our first year that we're going to actually have to turn students away.
Mm,
So you have to be patient and you have to watch that work. And some of it's unknown.
yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's definitely. there are certain CTE pathways that just have the draw and others that, you kind of have to build that. And I think, it's just a recognition that that's okay. That's just kind of the reality we live in. And all we can do is try and find the ways to help students connect to purpose and passion and see themselves in those other places. And I think we've also seen that it can be a little bit of a kind of, we use this term positive conspiracy, right? Like if a couple students or you get a pod or a group or a certain friend group and some people get interested, then and you can build some great experiences around it. It actually can start to build some traction, but it isn't always easy. I definitely think that's a great point to call out.
Yeah, and I think the other thing like this is kind of higher level, like boots on the ground, you got to get the student interest. But the
Mhm.
other piece is creating that family-like atmosphere. And I know, and that's something that I think about within our academy system in particular. So I'm going to
Mhm.
use our Avid system for a minute. So our Avid system, right, students don't ever want out, right? Even when they're not making the GPA, even when they're struggling, they don't want out because they like the group that they're with. They like the teachers, they like the team. And so
Mhm.
you kind of almost have to force them out or get them a tutor, or like get them up, right? Like that's what you want. Um, and then in the end, right, my naysayers are like, well, they're not going to go into the health industry or they're not going to go into education or like, they have their whole lives before them. Why are they committing now? And I guess my answer to that is they don't have to commit now. They don't have to commit for the rest of their lives. What they're learning and what they're doing, they're excited about it. They're excited to be a part of something. And if they can take that hard work that they learned and getting through the grind and earning some college credits and some technical skills along the way, I call that a win. Doesn't
Yeah.
have to, they don't all have to be teachers or they don't all have to be doctors.
Yeah, and I think that's even more true, right, for the younger generations. Like, even just in a couple of generations, it's gone from you pick your employer and you're there until you retire, right, to now it's very common, obviously, to shift every couple of years. And, even major selection, right? Kids choose and change their major multiple times. And so I really like that recognition that it's okay. And it's not about a commitment to a life. It's about really exploring something in depth and that what it takes there in terms of that hard work, getting some of these credentials, thinking about these industry connections, like so much of that is, industry agnostic transferable skills. And so
Yeah.
because you're working at presenting yourself professionally, because you're understanding what it takes to get a formal certification, you can take that into any other place that you want to take that, and that's going to be useful. And I think that's sometimes what people miss. And so I like that term, there are going to be naysayers, and you just got to have, your belief and your understanding kind of with you and ready to share and try to kind of shift that messaging over time for more people. And that actually segues nicely. I did actually want to dive into because I saw you the other week at that Central Coast K16 collab, GS Golden State Pathway Northern Regional Leadership Convening, the
Yeah, that big
longest
long word. Yeah.
longest meeting title that we've had in a while.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, just the way I think that's another piece I think that is really important here is real certifications, real kind of licensure, other ways to kind of help make this feel more real to students and families and even to educators and the broader partners, whether intersegmentally or with industry. And so and you mentioned you looked at labor market data. Are there any other kind of pieces? I know you mentioned strong students and strong educator, but just as you thought about making that pitch to the community around, the importance of these roles and this particular why you kind of wanted to lead with the health one, was there anything else around, that certification, that labor market, that industry needs side that you think would be useful for others to think about? Like, if I wanted to start a pathway, how did you go and validate that? Should it just be apparent or obvious? Do you sometimes have to go to different places to try to build that story? I'm curious, was that, hard from that angle? I know you said from the strong ed and strong student interest, that was kind of already covered, but I'm just curious from the industry side. Yeah, was that difficult? And then how can others build stories around that to sell it?
Yeah, so from the industry, my mind is going in many different directions. So
Yeah,
from the
sorry.
industry side and building like the Academy of Education piece, there's certainly some major barriers to getting students in an internship. But that and we still have that. Like, so I want to point out when our juniors and seniors do their 75 hours per year of internship hours, right? They have to do those as part of their college credits. So what they what we'd like to say, and we have 3 local partners, right? So we have the Hazel Hawkins Community Hospital, San Benito Health Foundation, and San Benito County Behavioral Health, right? For our students who are interested in the mental health piece. They are willing partners, but it's a significant lift for them to take on a high school intern, not just from the liability standpoint, right? So if lawyers around the world, we'd all be in padded rooms by ourselves. That piece is huge. And so we had to reassure the industry partners, like they have, the HIPAA certifications, like a pre-certification for our students. They have their BLS first aid. They have these pieces. And then we invite them to come see our students so that they have confidence, right? And so they have confidence that their students can do the work that they're asking, and that the kid's not going to screw around or steal something, or right. Like there has to be, I think the magic word is trust. There has to be trust between the industry and the school site that we're going to send them good kids. And then we set up a system for that, right? The kids have to apply. They are interviewed. And I have to say, our county behavioral health was like, these kids interview better than the people we interview for real jobs, right? Because we prep them. We want that trust there. Well, we want everybody to walk away with feeling good about it and feeling productive about it. But with all that being said, right, we're a small town. We have 60,000. I want to talk about some barriers that we still have, right? We have these 3 huge foundations that are supporting us, but one's only taking 1 intern. The other one's only taking 2. The third one's only taking 6. I have 60 other kids that need hours, right? And so those hours come from our athletic trainer. So she's a part of our, right, that goes back to the really solid backbone that we had previously. So it's in that patient care. We now have internal internships, right? So yep, the majority of our kids do it with our athletic director. We have many things for them to do, but we have nurses. We have a nurse on campus. They intern with our nurse. We have a wellness center. They intern with our wellness center. So you have to get creative. And I think we get too focused on, well, if this kid wants to work in a lab, they've got to be doing an intern in a lab. That's not it. We just need to expose them to what's out there and what could be.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's what we've experienced.
No, I think it's important to remind people, like, because sometimes it can feel insurmountable. Like, how do I go and find 60 internships in an academy or some sort of cohort model for a pathway? And it is daunting to think about, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely want to validate that. And yeah, the getting creative, I think there's a lot of different pathways you can imagine while these functions still matter. Like I think we know another district where there's, a graphic design element and they're like, well, where do we find this locally? There's not as much of an industry. Well, it's like, well, hey, local government has needs, the district has needs, and those aren't not real use cases, right? Those are real people's jobs as well. So yeah, I think that's quite helpful. So I did want to see, is there any other, because I know you're kind of a queen of data, right? And I'm curious if there are any
I don't know
other.
if I'm that great, but thank you for the compliment.
Yeah, no, I mean, every time I see you present, there's at least a few good charts. Are there any things that you found most, again, useful tips, tricks, suggestions, stumbling blocks, right, in terms of data that was maybe less useful than you hoped for, or maybe the juice wasn't worth the squeeze in terms of collecting it? Or, hey, here's one that was actually low effort, but huge return. I'm just curious, just as a quick call out. And we're going to move into more of like a lightning round here. And so I got 3 or 4 of these where you're just like, boom, this is the answer that comes to mind. We're going to stay at that little bit higher level.
I would say in terms of data, start with where you're at. Collect your demographics, right? Like that is the biggest thing. And look, we're still like, I'm trying to get a data dashboard together, and that's like pulling teeth. But just collect your demographics. What does it look like in your student information system for the students who are accessing those programs? The biggest thing that I came away with, right? Like, because you can feel and you can think, but now I need to see. And when I pulled that data, just your demographics, it was exciting to see that our females were accessing the Academy of Health Science at an extremely high rate. And that coincided with our ELL students, it very high, like no opportunity gap between our general student population, because I compared it to our student population. So no opportunity gap between our ELL students accessing and our Academy of Health Science students. And then the last piece that I was really excited about, right, was our SED. So socioeconomically disadvantaged students are accessing it at a higher rate than our general student pop. And so that's exciting because that means that I'm serving our historically underserved students. But I want to point out, right, that the quantitative and qualitative data need to match. And so one of the things I think about, and this is really going real far, so I'll go down this rabbit hole very quickly, is when you deal with different cultures, when you're culturally responsive, many different cultures only see certain sectors of the industry available for their female population, right? That it's only available. And our allied health from Gavilan College, she called it out, and I was like, you're right. She goes, my family grew up at the only two industries that I could ever enter was nursing or teaching. And I didn't want either, but that's my choice. And she chose nursing. And so I think about that a lot. And I think about how are we serving the cultures that we have in our communities, and how are we serving them well? So that's my rabbit hole.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's quite powerful, and it's good to really think about your local context and how that might shift kind of perceptions and where the energy needs to be to help, build that more holistic picture for students and families. All right, next lightning round one. There's kind of, I guess, two ways to frame this. I know one of the questions was going to be about how you're looking to move forward in terms of your pathways. You've spoken a lot about how the lessons from the health has informed the ed. And so I think maybe another way to ask this is like, let's imagine you're a CTE administrator in another district. You're going to start another school, independent school. You're going to start a new pathway from scratch. What should they be focusing on first? Like, what are those foundational, long lead time kind of elements that they should really ground themselves in? Maybe, yeah, I'm curious how you would approach the beginning of this process.
So always look at what you've got. So what do you have? What's strong? Who is strong? What are they looking for? In particular, right? Like I think about, I think about like Danielle Cody was a very strong teacher, and she was very willing to expand into an academy, right? Like I can't do it without willing partners. And it doesn't have to be all of them, but you just got to start with what you've got. For another example, right, the Academy of Education, like all of our feeder schools are desperate for more help, right? Like that's a universal thing. So I've got that. They're willing to take interns right now, today. And so there's my strength. Okay, how can I build on that? It's very hard to build something from scratch, right? Unless there's the right elements and the right weather. So I would start from what do you have? What are your strengths?
Yeah. Don't need to break completely new ground. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Any other just like top of mind, big roadblocks to watch out for, obstacles to watch out for, other lessons learned, kind of just writ large around CTE, kind of we could obviously talk to you for hours and years and work with you and still learn more every day. But I'm just curious if anything is present for you recently or otherwise, just jumps out to you for other coordinators and directors in these positions.
I think the one thing that doesn't get talked about enough is your unions. So your classified union and your certificated unions, and they need to be on board from the beginning. Whatever your relationship with them is, or whatever the relationship, if you're coming into a new district, right, you need to figure that out real quick. Because you need to learn how to navigate that. That is going to make it or break it for you. Particularly when you get into the dual enrollments, the co-teaching, the outside of school hours stuff. You have got to get your unions on board and at least understanding what's happening. So that's the biggest piece for me that I see right now. The second piece for me is you can't have it all. You can't have it all. So pick what you're good at and run with it and develop it. And the other things will flourish and bloom. I think that's important too. Don't think you're going to get it all.
Well, thank you, Claire. This has been so helpful. It sparked a lot of kind of ongoing thoughts. I'm sure we're going to follow up separately as well to keep the
Yeah.
conversation
Yeah.
going. But I'm really, yeah, I think for me, one of my biggest takeaways was this kind of both from the data approach and looking at all of these pathways that I could work for. How or where do I start? I just think this idea of really lean into strengths, lean into what you have. It doesn't need to be the new flashy thing that you have to move mountains to get going. How can you build and expand out? That really stood out to me, and I think that might be helpful to others that maybe feel that pressure, right? The superintendent or the board or the community wants something new and flashy. It's like, hey, let's prove the model in a known space where it's not, fighting uphill the whole way. I think that was great.
That's
Uh,
important. Build your
yeah,
confidence first. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I'm going to ask Aaron the same question, maybe top takeaway, and then I'll come back to you, Claire, as well for just what's your what's your main thing here that really
Sure.
resonated, Aaron.
Yeah, boy, lots of them, but one of them that I think is critical is that that internship piece. Like everybody we talk to struggles with that.
Mhm.
And how you talked about um, you know where possible, finding opportunities, local to the school site, is we find over and over again are the things that really make the difference. So it's in the school itself, like you mentioned, the athletic director or
Be on campus nurse. Yeah.
or yeah, the nurse, or
Yeah.
near the school. So you have local elementary schools that are able to take interns. And while it's
Mhm.
nice to have those, kid can go to a lab across town or whatever, but like you said, often they take one or two. Um, and part of that is what is that bidirectional value proposition where it's not just babysitting, but they're actually getting some benefit from having somebody there. And along with that is the idea of kind of internship readiness. And I think you described a very robust process of making sure that the kids you send out, there's some sort of validation of their readiness to be able to provide value and not just be sort of babysat. And I think that that's a critical element that you called out.
Sure.
That's my big kind of
Yeah.
item to focus on, I think.
Yeah. And Claire, I mean, we could have you on any of these topics, but that was our last kind of podcast topic and a few articles out around
Sure.
internships. And I'm sure we're going to follow up more on that with you to pull in some of these other lessons learned. So yeah, what about for you? Kind of just as you sit back and think about this conversation, any takeaway from you, anything that you felt kind of most powerful or aligned to? Yeah.
I think, the piece for me is, we can share data, we can share systems, we can share those, you know, I think very technical pieces, right? Like I think everybody's looking for like, okay, step one, step two, step three, and then it's going to be successful. I think we have to temper ourselves in terms of making sure that, do what you can with where you're at, do what you can. But the more powerful piece for me that I didn't even think about when I started this journey, and I'm now just starting to see the fruits of it, is the mindset shift. So the mindset shift of our teachers, right, and in particular, and our students too, but I'll just give this one piece, is our teachers have students in their classrooms, in their academies, that are of varying abilities, right? They're not all cream of the crop. They're all very, we have 504s, IEP, EL, like we have McKinney-Vento. They're all in there. But what the teachers love the most is that they're all excited and motivated to be there. And not only does that shift the kids' mindset, right? Like they're excited to learn again, but the teachers are excited to teach. And that's really important. Um, those are the things that you can't capture in any data piece. So
Hmm.
it's important.
Yeah, love that texture, that feeling of walking into that room buzzing full of energy. It's different, right? It's hard to grab. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. Aaron, before I kind of wrap us out, any final thoughts from your side? I know I want to make sure
Oh,
you have
just bunch of follow-up uh, questions.
a
I'm just typing one out. One of the challenges is that we find is really making sure counselors understand how to get kids into CTE classes that they really
Mhm.
want to be in, and being able to sort of know what they are and market them rather than, as can often happen, kids just kind of ending up where the counselor, needed to fill a seat or,
Mhm.
whatever it might be. And I think that, how to go from maybe that not desirable version to the desirable version of getting kids, really where they want to be, et cetera, I think is a key piece that might even follow up with you at some point just to say, hey, where do you think you're at in that spectrum? And, what, sort of how did you move closer to where you want to be? What were successes in that regard? But that's it.
Yeah.
Just more questions. That's my takeaway. But
Awesome.
yeah, thanks, Claire, so much for taking the time this morning. You mentioned a very busy day, including an evening event, and hosting others at your site. And we just are always impressed with what you're accomplishing over there and your willingness to share what you're learning. So just really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I appreciate sharing and you guys ask good questions. It makes me think, so it's good.
Great to hear that. Well, as always, there'll be some more details around follow-ups
Okay.
in the show notes. But if anyone ever wants to reach out, discuss any of this, please let us know, and maybe we can even broker a broader conversation with a few of you and Claire. We'll see. So thank you everyone for listening in, and hope to see you around. Cheers.